What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be video 3 of 3 in the 9.15 PTR Warlock feedback series. Now, Demonology is the final spec that I haven't covered, so this video is going to be based around that. Feedback on Demonology, its toolkit, talents, I'd say conduits, but for the most part, Demonology conduits are actually in a pretty good spot, and just general feedback I think the spec needs. Now, this has really been the first tier in a while that Demonology's actually seen play in a relevant raid kind of setting. We've seen it from time to time on Zakul or a few niche bosses here and there, going way back to the VOP major, VOP minor days of Demonology, but for the most part, Lock has been just AF and Destro based for a while. But this tier, with the changes that came to Demo and the nerfs to AF as well, things changed a little bit. So I thought the best way to start off here would be, once again, a brief tier review talking about Demonology on every single fight and how it ended up, panning out as a whole. Now, initially we thought this would be a big Demo Destro tier, and there were a handful of bosses like Remnant of Ner'zhul, Soul Render, Painsmith that were single target based bosses with ads on them, like the orbs on Ner'zhul or the spiked balls on Painsmith that needed a bit of cleave damage, and I saw the potential for both Demonology and Destro on them. Affliction, up until this point, up until a few weeks ago, wasn't really very valid for a lot of reasons, and to be fair, at this point, it's still not the best, albeit on a few fights it's pretty good. But we weren't really sure if Demonology was going to see play on those fights or if Destro was the better initial prog spec. Now, getting into it, the Terror Guru is a mix of everything here. Once again, this boss is a grab bag kind of boss. It can be whatever you want. Like if you roll good talents, you can do good damage. It's basically just a Terror Guru. It's a good first boss, but as far as like parsing potential things go, not really one I want to base much off of. I will say Demonology is the predominant spec here, and for good reason. It's your best single target spec. Now, Eye of the Jailer is a mix of Destro and AF, which we expected here. We actually expected mostly Destro in this fight. A couple AF lucks up here, interestingly enough. Now, 5 PIs, DSS. I will say, once again, Affliction with DSS is very, very strong in a lot of settings where you can get cleave. Eye of the Jailer, you can get some cleave, and hey, 5 power infusions will do a lot regardless. There is a Demo parse here, mixed in with 3 PIs. Now, referencing PI, Demonology, you can play Demonology without PI, but Demonology is one of the better scaling specs with PI in the game. And coupling that with stamina scaling effects like, Nias, Growth, Invigoration, Rally, APT, AV, whatever would have you, Blood Decay Legendaries, that's when Demonology gets really, really insane as far as like parsing goes and the big single target damage they can actually output. Moving on to the 9 here, a Destro parse at the top, a lot of Demonology. Now, I tested this fight as as Destruction, and felt that Destro was probably going to be the play here with Cinders and Roaring Blaze, and just Demo wasn't bad because phase 1 is a lot of stacked 2 target with a bit of 3 target cleave. When the boss comes down, you get a little bit of 4 target, but then like 2/3 of the fight is single target based, which Demo is, better at than Destro. And with that stacked phase 1 value, that stacked phase 1 cleave, Demonology ended up actually being the best progression spec on this fight, I feel. Now, the longer the tier goes, you might end up seeing some Destro parses mixed in with some meme builds, all that kind of stuff. But regardless, Demonology surprised me personally on the 9 as far as the prog spec of choice went. Remnant is a mix of everything here. AF can be cheesy, but also very good with DSS on Orb Cleave or Orb Cleave with Soul Rot for a big single target AoE damage profile, both all in one. Remnant was a Destro boss in prog because the orbs needed to die quickly. They had a lot of health. However, the orbs were nerfed by 60% like a month and a half ago. They have less health on Mythic than they do Heroic now, which is a tragedy. But regardless, a lot of locks have shifted just playing Demonology in this fight, which is probably the best call. You don't even get a full Havoc window as far as Destro is concerned, and the boss is just sort of patchwork based besides that. Now, I wouldn't fault you for playing either. In the end, you can play AF here too, but it's more of like a, hey, you need exact CDs and to get PI at a certain point with your DSS, which is not as universally applicable to everybody else as it might be some people. But regardless, Remnant has become a Demo boss, I feel, which was initially a Destro boss. So interesting, to say the least. Soul Render, big AF boss. I thought this was going to be Destro or Demo, but then AF was buffed, you had DSS, so the seed spam, and well, the rest is history. Painsmith, this is also a very big Destro boss in prog. Everybody played Destro because the spike balls needed to die fast. The ads coming out of phase 2, back into phase 1, they also need to die really fast. And you would actually pre-infernal this boss and hold DPS, so you had 3-minute cooldowns being your infernal, everything coming actually out of that. Now we've seen, once again, nerfs to Painsmith, 10% nerf to the boss's health, 10% to the orbs, and 10% to the ads. That coupled with the insane power scaling of this tier and gear, this has become a demo boss, I feel, more or less. You can play Destro, but the Destro build shifted towards Reign of Chaos and Wilfrids for just 2-minute infernals, and I guess you can maybe say a little bit of pad, but more relevancy for infernals when you're not holding DPS anymore as a guild, and moved away from the Roaring Blaze builds. But a lot of people have just started playing demo on it because you don't really need to put as much damage on the ads or the spike balls. You just, once again, kill the boss. Guardian, we knew it was going to be a big demo fight from the get-go. Unfortunately, incredibly undertuned, but still, this is the fight that had, you know, this is the sludge-fist of the tier. This is the fight that had a lot of potential to be a really good patchwork fight. This is the fight you bring your demo locks, you stack your demo locks with your blood decay, with your APTs, with your rallies, with your stamina effects, and feed them PIs. And this fight could have been really, really good in Prague, but unfortunately it died in like 5 volts to Guilds in the Race World first because tuning was so off on it. But regardless, always been a good demo fight. Fate Scribe, similar to other fights, I thought would be a Destro fight. Demo didn't seem terrible either. We ended up playing all 3 specs on this fight during raid testing, but once again, the tank ads, they die relatively easily, and the small ads do too. And when you come out of the second phase 2, just pop Lust and kill the boss, what's the best spec to do that? Demonology. Single target fight in disguise. You play Demo. Kel'Thuzad is a grab bag of garbage. It's an interesting boss. I thought it could be, but unfortunately this fight is just a conglomeration of garbage, so we ignore this fight. And Sylvanas, there's a wall of Demo here because, well, Demo, which I would say the best spec in this fight. Strong single target damage profile, have implosion value for Dark Sentinels, for arrows, demonic strength for Dark Sentinels, arrows. Destro's probably the worst in this fight. I think AF is actually better than Destro on this fight. In a setting where you're looking for specific things, I think AF does more than what Destro will do in this fight. Destro does everything in a less than mediocre way. Less than mediocre single target, less than mediocre ad cleave, Dark Sentinel cleave, arrow cleave. In phase 2, you can get some value. But then phase 3, you're pure single target again, and you're just doing subpar damage. So this ended up being a pretty big demonology tier. Like I said, though, Demo really hadn't had its time in the sun and the light for a while. Honestly, in a very, very, very long time. I can't even remember the last time Demo was played this much in a tier. Maybe back to Emerald Nightmare? I'm not even sure. Actually, maybe Nighthold? I don't know. But with all that being said, there were certainly some issues that popped up this tier. Some that I made a video on, the bug video, and just some issues toolkit wise, rotationally, talent wise, that I think drew a bit more attention than people thought it would, and really sort of was moved to the forefront of, hey, this should probably be looked at. Let's talk a little bit about those. Alrighty, so starting off with Demo's, I guess his baseline toolkit, there's not really a conduit section in this video because honestly, every single demonology conduit is good. Fell Commando, Carnivorous Stalkers, Born of Blood, and Tyrant Soul. I wish every spec had the conduit power that Demo does. They're all good. Even if one's bad, you can just play Soul Eater, but we don't because every single one is good. So moving on from those, the general toolkit of demonology though. Now there's 2 big things here, really. One being, I'm away from these things, one being like the main thing I hope is addressed at some point, but I really don't know how much of an issue, or like, I guess, how much work it actually is, and that's Demo with stamina scaling. Now, before you get angry at me, I'm not against Demo scaling with stamina effects. It's fine. It's done similar things in the past. It's okay. But the issue that Demo has with stamina scaling, here's my Felguard. I'll set him as my focus. Here's the actual focus frame. The issue with Demo stamina scaling is that the stamina effects update, well, just later. At times you'll get a near instant update on your pet stamina. Let's say, for example, I cast Soul Rot with Grove Invigoration. I will get more health, so my pets will get more health. And then when my pets get more health and I cast Summon Demonic Tyrant with Demonic Consumption talented, my Tyrant siphons more health from my pets because they have more health from me, so it's more damage, a la Demo stamina scaling. But the issue is that the stamina update on your pets, and to a similar extent secondary stats at times, is not instant. Now I think this is the same issue for like hunter pets and unholy DKs, and I guess just other pet classes in general. I don't know how much of like a back end issue it is that would be like update or try and look into, but it's a pretty big issue for demonology as well because the whole spec is really built around it, and decon is so incredibly powerful, which we'll get to in a minute here. So for example, let's say I just attack this target here. Let's cast our bolt. Watch my actual pet's health here. I'll cast the Soul Rot. My health will go up instantly. Watch how long for him to update. Here's the Soul Rot. My health. His health. There you go. You can see it took a little while, a couple seconds, give or take. At times it's longer and at times it's shorter. The main issue is that you can't really guarantee when you're going to get the actual update or not. And that's not just for him, that's for all of my imps, for my dreadstalkers, for my Violfiend, for my Grim Warfell Guard. There's no actual way to force an update. We thought there was initially by popping like a stamina potion or something like that, but there actually isn't really a way to force the stamina update. So the problem is, and also the effect just fell there, and we had to wait like 3 seconds for it to fall there too, and to reset back to the previous health thresholds. You can see it from both ends of the spectrum there. At times it benefits us, and at times it's not very good. Now the issue is that there are effects like Nia's Grove Invigoration ability and Bonded Hearts. Now, Bonded Hearts is behind my camera, but you can see it. It essentially gives you 50% increased health from the actual Grove Invigoration ability for 5 seconds. Now, that 5 seconds, you can, if they update it instantly, you could make that work by casting your Tyrant, whatever, getting everything going. Then your last hand of Gul'dan cast, Soul Rot Tyrant. But unfortunately, you can't do that because if the Soul Rot is delayed, which is most of the time, you won't get the Soul Rot effect on any of your pets. Pets that are summoned after the Soul Rot effect is active will have the actual stamina bonus off the bat. They'll spawn in with the extra health. But ones that are around beforehand, they have to update. And seeing if, like, let's say you do your entire setup here and push our Soul Rot back, for example. Let's say we cast our Bolt, go Grimoire, we're going Vilefiend, holding the Soul Rot just for simplicity's sake here in an example. Building the 5 here, there go the dogs, pop the Ruby, cast a couple of hands, give or take, build some shards here. Let's just do one more, for example. Cast your hand, and then go Soul Rot. Watch my pet's health here. Watch. Tyrant. Bam. Like the millisecond I cast my Tyrant, it updated. I couldn't even tell if it caught it or not, but the issue is you can't guarantee that update every time. If you could, that's great. That's awesome, but that's the issue. And it applies to more than just, you know, Grove Immigration. It's APT, AV, Rally, Blood Decay Legendaries, any kind of stamina scaling effect, that's an issue. Now, once again, I don't know how tough it is to address in the back end of things. It might be easy, it might be tough. But seeing as how the spec is sort of built around stamina effects and stamina scaling, it seems like it would be of a decent priority to try and fix. But once again, it could be a complete nightmare. And in the end, most of the time, you can just sort of cast things beforehand or just say, well, you know, that ability just doesn't really work. Now, the second thing I want to mention here, and honestly, I'm a bit on the fence about it, but it's having Summon Demonic Tyrant be an instant cast, or at least have the actual cast time of your Tyrant reduced a bit. It's already 1.6 seconds with haste and things like that. The issue is that going into this tier, we played Demonology. We thought we were going to be playing Demonology on a handful of fights, but I think people learned over the course of the tier with pet setups and Tyrant setups that Demonology gets punished a tremendous amount if you have to move during your Tyrant setup, or if you're going into like your final hand, let's say on the 9, for example, and you get the Frost Shard debuff. Oh, well, you gotta move, you know, and to be fair, you can probably squeeze a Tyrant casting, give or take there. But having your Demonic Tyrant be an instant cast would alleviate so many of those issues. Now, I see both sides of it. In the end, I don't think it's very likely to happen, just because, you know, it's sort of like a I guess you can say a skill kind of thing. The spec is sort of built around that and tuned, like decon is sort of tuned around that cast time on your Tyrant. It will be a large quality of life increase, and in the end, I would be a huge supporter of it for a lot of reasons. But I thought it was worth mentioning. Probably not too likely to happen, but it's been asked for over and over and over, and I just wanted to sort of throw it in as far as like the grab bag of, hey, baseline toolkit changes. Number 1, stamina scaling, and I guess just number 2, really some Tyrant setup leeway, forgiveness. Instant cast Tyrant stuff wouldn't be that bad. All right, Demonology talents. So compared to Affliction and Destruction, there's a handful of changes that I wish we would see to Demo talents. Probably not as much as I want for like, probably not as much as I want for AF, but there's still a good bit. So 15 row, I think Dreadlash and Demonic Strength are fine. Dreadlash pairs very well with the FTS build, the Big Dogs FTS Dreadlash Carnivorous Stalkers build. It's good, it's solid. It was changed, I believe, heading into 9.1, and the buff to it, the synergy that build has, is very, very strong. Dreadlash and Demonic Strength are actually pretty close when it comes to single target, which, depending on the fight, pure single target versus like most single target with ad spawning or, you know, fight duration, changes things a little bit. Most everybody opts for Demonic Strength at this point. Bioscourge Bombers has sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit. Now, I haven't played personally myself with it probably since I guess like mid BFA when they buffed the ability. And I think it's for a few reasons. Number one, demonic strength, Wilfred synergy is just strong. Demonic strength pairs with basically every tyrant. And number two, if you're in Mythic Plus, you're also you're playing either this or this with the single target build like this, or you're playing the Dreadlash FTS build with Soul Conduit or Grimoire, one of the two. Now, I do think bombers probably stand for a bit of a bump in damage where it would make it more relevant in settings where you might want that, you know, half a minute AoE profile. I haven't cast a spell in half a year where you want that half a minute AoE profile at that stacked AoE, you know, maybe twice as often as the Demonic Strength, give or take. There might be a couple fights next tier or even previous tiers where Bile Scourge might have been a little more relevant if it dealt a bit more damage. Now, I don't think it's in a bad spot regardless. I think there's just a lot of synergy between Demonic Strength and, you know, Wilfred's and Dreadlash FTS, but I wouldn't mind seeing Bile Scourge get a little bit of a bump, a little bit of love in, you know, some way heading into PTR. 25 row, Demonic Calling is basically your go-to. There is some potential with Power Siphon, which we'll get to this build with Power Siphon, Saxhold, and things in a little while. Doom is just a mess. Doom is unfortunately just not in a good spot. I think it might even sim a little higher than Demonic Calling, but nobody ever plays it for a lot of reasons. I don't really have a great suggestion for Doom besides just, I don't know, I don't even know. Just Doom is not good. Hasn't been good in a while. Sorry. If it was baseline, it would be fun. I think it would be fun to manage, and maybe make this Hand of Doom. Who knows how it used to be? But yeah, I don't think Doom is in a very good. It really hasn't been in a good spot in a long time. It's awkward to play with. It's just awkward in a lot of ways. Even when it was Curse of Doom in early PTR, and it had I think the Doom Guard clause on it, which is now removed because it never worked in 2 years. It was still sort of awkward. As much I don't like personally hate Doom, but I feel like the overall consensus for the demo community is just like Doom is just not a part of the toolkit in any way, shape, or form. Now, Power Siphon, I actually think is fine. Demonic Calling, I think is better, more synergistic, but Power Siphon, when it comes to like arenas and PvP, from what I've heard and from what I've seen, there's a big Necrolord, Power Siphon, Sack Souls, maybe Dreadlash build running around that can give you some pretty insane Demon Bolt casts. You pop your Power Siphon, have pets out, Sack Souls, Tyrant, and launch these insane Demon Bolts. I actually wish this was played a little more in PvE. I feel like it's close-ish, just not as relevant for a few reasons. And I think one of those big reasons is, I guess, spoilers ahead, Sack Souls not stacking multiplicatively, everything just being additive. Because you have Sack Souls, Power Siphon, Necrolord Decimating Bolt, you have Bale Spider's Burning Core, the legendary, that increases your damage to Demon Bolt and Shadow Bolt. Yeah, it's actually Demon Bolt, there you go. Don't even know, I haven't played it in forever. It was buffed in 9.1, and the duration was increased too. Still sees no play. You can even play FTS for more Shadow Flame damage. Demon Bolt is Shadow Flame damage. But unfortunately, all the stacking is additive and not multiplicative. Even playing this big build like with this and playing Necrolord and Bale Spiders, the damage is just nowhere near what Decon brings. And Decon is a much more powerful CD on a minute cooldown essentially, which is what you would like to see in a lot of settings like Mythic Plus, like certain boss fights with you know, like precarious timings. So I like Siphon, I think it's cool, but I think this build in general just needs a bit of help. But, you know, Demonic Calling is just good at the same time. 35 row FTS, Soul Strike, Vile Fiend. You play Vile Fiend or FTS here most of the time. Soul Strike was buffed heading in the 9.1 as well. Soul Strike feels like it could be a part of our baseline toolkit almost. It actually is one of those abilities like Cataclysm, where it just feels like this could be a part of our baseline toolkit, and I don't think anybody would give it a second thought. It's just, oh yeah, cool, I can cast this on the move. You know, your Felguard, your only pet you use is Demonology, right? Unless you're in some really, really weird spot and you have to pull your imp out for a Dispel or something, right? For like a second, you use your Felguard, Soul Strike. It's the only pet you can Soul Strike with. Like, it feels like it could be a part of our baseline toolkit very, very easily. But regardless, even with it not being, the damage and the shard that it gives is just not relevant at this point. Number one, due to this build being so good with Decon, Vile Fiend, extra pet extension, more stamina. For Decon, it's just so good. Unlike in BFA, where all you cared about was imps with Decon. It sacrificed your imps and you got a bonus with their remaining energy. This expansion, every pet you have siphons health, also extends those pets, including the imps, and more pets, more Decon value, and it's just sort of scaled to a point where it's in a pretty crazy spot. Either way, if they want to make it relevant, they buff the damage a good bit, but I don't think people are going to play FTS it over like the FTS Dreadlash build. I'm pouring an insane buff to it. You're not going to play it over Vile Fiend and Grimoire with Decon build. So yeah, we'll just sort of keep that in mind going on to the next row here. 45 row Soul Conduit, Grimoire, Inner Demons. Soul Conduit does see play at times in Mythic Plus with this build, more or less. Soul Conduit, more imp cast. You're casting your dogs basically on cooldown for the most part. FTS Red Lash applications with Carnivore Stalkers. More Soul Conduit procs, more imps, larger implosions. It all sort of makes sense and flows well. Now, I think there are two versions of this build. One plays Grimoire a bit. I like this build a little more, but they're both fine, give or take. It's there. It's an option. It was played a lot more in BFA, but it's technically, you know, still there. Once again, if you're raiding, barring it being a really weird AoE fight, you're playing this build, and that's basically it, because, hey, another pet extension, stamina effects, demonic consumption. That's it. Inner Demons is in a weird spot. Now, I honestly sort of feel like number one, they could actually increase the chance that you have to summon a demon to fight for you with Inner Demons. That would be a good step in the right direction. Number two, honestly, I wouldn't even hate having like 3 imps active with Inner Demons instead of 2. It probably wouldn't make a massive difference. Maybe a tiny bit more like stamina effects or bonuses for like decon if you're playing that there. But it would also sort of enable the actual implosive potential legendary, you know? So I mean, like, I guess technically it's still there, you know, but I mean, 5% more haste. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching a bit here, but either way, like, I just feel like Inner Demons is really cool, but it's just always missed the mark. You know, it's always been just not good enough. And I think once again, a part of that reason is just Grimoire, and that's because of, well, I guess moving on here, decon. So increased proc against an Inner Demons, maybe a 3rd imp. But the big thing here is decon. 50 row, Sack Souls, Demonic Consumption, and Nether Portal. I actually really like Nether Portal, but just because I like the ability doesn't mean that it's no, good. The problem with Nether Portal, okay, there's a handful of them. So let's just open up with Nether Portal, all right? So watch the rotation after we cast our Dreadstalkers, number 1, and we'll just get into it. So let's just say we precast our Bolt here. We'll go Soul Rot, whatever. Soul Rot, cast the Portal, bam, there it is. Grimoire, Vile Fiend. We'll go Dogs here, Dogs. We have 2 shards left because of proc. We cast a Ruby, whatever. Shadow Bolt, hand. Shadow Bolt, hand. And then Tyrant. At this point you go like hand, depending on like how much time's left in your portal. We go 1 hand and we're fine from extra demon. The problem is that Portal is a 3-minute cooldown. Now, albeit it's really cool. I'm not following your own optimal rotation here, by the way, but Portal's a really cool ability. I like it a lot. But the problem is that it's a 3-minute cooldown, and it does a good bit less damage than Decon does. And Decon is a 1-minute cooldown, essentially, with Wilfrids, or a 1.5-minute cooldown. Not playing Wilfrids. So, by the way, the damage breakdown here is so cool. There's a million pets in this thing. Illidari Satyrs, Frothing... This is my trinket, technically, but Urzul's Void Terrors. Portal is really, really cool. But the issue is, it's quite literally twice as long, if not more, 3 times as long as Decon with Wilfrids. And the damage it does is just not optimal. Now, that's the first issue. Number 2, it requires you to plant for 15 seconds, essentially like 22 give or take, because you're casting typically like 2 hands after like the Tyrant cast, because your Baleful Shards come in, and not move to min-max Nether Portal demons that you summon. And number 3, which is sort of like a minor thing, people don't really like the rotation of, like, say you're at 0 shards, you cast your portal, but you're going into your rotation of like going Shadow Bolt, hand, Shadow Bolt, hand, because Portal doesn't proc, you don't proc demons based off the amount of like shards you spend. It says whenever you spend shards, every time you spend shards, you'll also summon or command demons from the Nether to come help you, all that stuff. Sure. Now, would it be a nice, I guess, quality of life change to make it like per shard spent? Technically, sure, I guess. There might be some weird overlaps with, like, you know, demonic calling procs, like random refunds, this and that. But I mean, for the most part, like, you're probably going to be casting about the same number of Shadow Bolts and the same amount of spells, like give or take, right? It might work out to being like a minor gain, like you're casting 1 less hand, give or take, so you can squeeze in 1 more shard. But for the most part, like, this has been something people have asked for a while for Portal to change, and Blizzard really hasn't done much about it. So I'm half wondering if it's just like they want you to have like a bit of a different rotation playing Nether Portal. They want to keep that, you know, extra level of, like, I don't know, in-depth rotational play, whatever, with the Shadow Bolt shard, or Shadow Bolt hand gameplay. Regardless of that, the main issues are that this is just 3 times as long as Decon and doesn't do the damage that Decon does. Now, I think Portal's really cool. What I would like to see for Portal, and there's a million ways you can spin this. I've spoken to not other locks about it as well. I would love to see a reduced cooldown on Nether Portal. I'd love to see it at realistically 1.5 minutes. I think that would be really cool. You could do 2 minutes. I think 1.5 minutes would be a little cooler because it would sort of put you in a spot of like, all right, well, you know, let's say it's competitive with Decon. Do you want to play Wilfred's with Decon, or do you want to play, like, let's say Horn Nightmare or X Legendary with Nether Portal? Because that Nether Portal would sync perfectly with every single Tyrant, because Tyrant's 1.5 minutes as far as his baseline cooldown is concerned. It's just Wilfred's that gives you that minute Tyrant with Decon, right? Which further value, you know, adds value to the actual talent. So, like, I think a CDR on this thing is, like, really, really important. 2 minutes would be okay too. It probably still lock you into the Wilfred's camp if it was relevant damage wise. But I still feel that the actual demons that spawn from this thing, it just needs a buff. It needs either like a cooldown reduction and a bit of tuning, maybe a buff or a nerf. Or if it stays the same way on a 3-minute cooldown, it probably still needs a substantial buff to its single target. Decon is just so strong. If Decon and Portal are the same in single target, you take Decon every single time. Because Decon is a minute cooldown, Mythic Plus rating. A lot of fights have like these, you know, 1 minute like add spawn DPS checks, whatever. And even if just having that 1 minute damage profile is so much more relevant in those settings, like a 3-minute cooldown where I got to plant for 20 seconds, cast my demons, and then go. They both suffer from the same kind of mobility, okay, gotta move mechanic thing, but Decon is just better. Now, the other issue, that's Portal. The issue with Decon, though, is like, it sort of just like pigeonholes you into playing as one build. This is your Decon build. That's basically it. If you're playing FTS Red Last, sure, you play this, it's fine. But like, that build's more built around Mythic Plus, AoE Implosion, which is really cool too. You play Decon just because Decon's good. I mean, but Decon just pigeonholes you into playing as one build here. Now, like, I don't really want Decon to be nerfed. I just want other abilities to be as relevant. And Decon might need a tiny bit of knocking down depending on what they do with these two. But either way, it poses a lot of problems because you've got Portal at 3 minutes, Decon 1, literally 3 times as long a cooldown. Now, Sack Souls is a mess too. It honestly feels to me like Sack Souls could probably just be like some kind of ability almost in the 45 row for how, I guess you can say, irrelevant it is compared to Decon and Portal. And yeah, we're mixing in Decon and Portal here too. These both feel like big final talents. You have this huge demonic commander, you open this pour open the Nether, or like, hey, my Shadow Bolts deal more damage. That's cool. That's really cool. Putting the flavor and everything of it aside, it's just been really undertuned for like a very, very, very long time. We played it initially in like BFA when Demo was first a thing, and I think they buffed Decon, and we played Decon and just nothing else since then. It's been Decon, Demo, and that's just it. Now, I think one of the issues is that, once again, the stacking of Sack Souls, the other, like, you know, Shadow Bolt, Demon Bolt based effects are all additive from what I've heard and not multiplicative. Now, that could be adjusted, but it's a very dangerous path to walk because you already have some pretty insane PvP Demon Bolt builds from what I've heard and things, and the scaling could get out of control. You've got Sack Souls, you've got FTS for Shadow Flame damage, you've got Power Siphon, you've got Dreadlash for reapplying FTS technically, or I guess AoEing it, give or take, it'll reapply itself. But regardless, you've also got Necrolord, Decimating Bolts. You've got Bale Spider's Burning Core, Legendary. That's like 5 effects that can increase Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt damage, which is pretty insane. So I get why it's not multiplicative stacking, but regardless, the ability just seems like it's sort of like watered down. It's sort of bland. I could very easily see it being in this row here. And like, as much as I hate to say it, like putting Grimoire here instead, like swapping these two around, it almost feels like that's a better swap. Grimoire feels infinitely more impactful than Sack Souls ever has. Now, I don't really want that change because that makes Decon a lot worse. Your choice is Grimoire or Decon or Portal. But hey, that would be sort of cool. 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, I guess. That'd be sort of cool. But I mean, what I'm just getting at is like Sack Souls needs to be looked at again. I don't know if it needs to be buffed to a certain extent or just like sort of reworked. And typically Blitz doesn't rework talents and abilities like in the middle of an expansion. Typically it's like a new kind of expansion thing, especially in a 0.5 patch. It doesn't really happen very much, but like Sack Souls is one of those abilities that you just really never played for Demo. It's just sort of been covered in cobwebs for a long time, similar to how Sow the Seeds was, and they buffed Sow by an insane amount, and now it's played everywhere. So like, I think Demo's talent issues are a mix of a lot of things. One, just Decon being just so overwhelmingly powerful, and like really the only ability we've played in a long time since the start of BFA, and the changes in 9.0 with Grimoire and Vile Fiend into your dogs now giving stamina effects, and the change to decon no longer being imp based, and just the general tuning of other abilities being a bit off. They did buff Portal in I think 9.0, but it still needs a buff. My hope for Portal, a CDR to like 1.5 minutes, or like if they leave it at 3, a substantial damage increase. It has to be better than decon. It has to be better than decon and pure single target. And then that'll come down to what I feel is like more of a timing based thing, whether you want more timers for like, you know, damage thresholds or like push windows, or you just want like the overall damage, and the fight ends at a good point where your portal expires, your demons are out, and then it falls over. Stack souls can be your smoothing ability if they want to leave it in this row, but it needs attention too. And the same can be said for inner demons, soul strike, and you know, I wouldn't mind taking a bump for bombers. Oh, and Doom is just doomed. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video gave you all a better breakdown on just, I don't know, how Demonology was in 9.1 and some changes that I would like to see heading into 9.15 PTR, and then hopefully, eventually, maybe 9.2. Now, let me know what you guys think of these suggestions and everything in the comment section below. And if you have any questions or suggestions of your own, be sure to drop them down there, and I'll check them out and or be sure to get back to you. Some of the actual changes that were made in 9.1, like legendary changes, Malefic Wrath and Implosion, were literally taken from the feedback document we put out, and I believe the Implosion change was mentioned in a comment section of a video that I liked a lot. It's like, legitimately, it's not a waste of your time. If you want to drop them down there, feel free to do so. Personally, like, if Demonology ended up being in the same state that it is now in 9.15 and 9.2, I wouldn't be incredibly disappointed. I don't think it's in like a terrible spot. I do wish that Portal and some things were a little bit more relevant, just a little bit better, I guess, on their own. But in the end, having that 1 minute damage profile in decon, and I guess just everything that Demonology brings to the table, is not really that bad. I do think this tier is a bit awkward as far as Demo was concerned as well, with just Demo being a decent prog spec, but it's getting better as far as tier is concerned. And like, there's a big difference between getting PI and not getting PI while playing Demonology. But nonetheless, hopefully some changes that are made in 0.5, and they're all, you know, well, eventually taken into account. If you guys are interested in acquiring any weak ORS profiles or add-ons you've seen here, you can get all free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime, feel free to do so. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you guys a million times for all the support. I really, truly do appreciate it. If you guys are interested in supporting, there should be a link somewhere up here, one of the top 2 corners. Thanks a ton. All that being said, if you want to see more WoW content and help with the channel, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below. It helps out a ton. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.